let's talk about the racial wealth disparity in America and what could be done to narrow it. Hi, I'm John McNeil, and this is the Invest Strong Network. Welcome. So, one of the largest problems beguiling the United States economy and its society writ large, really since the beginning, but certainly now in this contemporary age, is the ginormous chasm in wealth between uh, those Americans of European descent, whites, and those Americans of African and Hispanic descent, black and Latinos. Now, there have been various reasons proposed for this enormous disparity. Uh, some have said, well, it's about education, and specifically the struggling public education system in the United States of America. Others have said, well, it's about the family breakdown, right? So families break down, divorce, single parent families, out of wedlock births, things of that nature, all contribute to a wealth disparity, as has the geographic disparity, right? So certain areas of the country have this tendency of just being more prone to economic development and growth and upwardly mobile lifestyles. And unfortunately, many blacks and Hispanics just don't live in those areas, right? Now, there is some truth to all of that. So these are all contributing factors. But in my opinion, from studying this very closely, the single largest cause of the wealth disparity in this country is our criminal justice system. Because over the last 50 plus years, our criminal justice system has been in this mode of waging a war on drugs, and we'll put war on drugs in air quotes here. Now, this war on drugs really originated back in the late 1960s. And so it was designed by the Nixon administration and its acolytes to target counterculture influences in America, the so called hippies and flower children that were beguiling the older, more conservative parts of the population back then, right? And the war on drugs was designed to hit them where it hurt, and turning many of these hippie and flower children into criminals via drug convictions. Now, the Nixon administration actually found willing accomplices in the Congress and in state houses around the country. So now you have a situation where state and local governments have gotten on board with the war on drugs, and now this thing had become a movement that was basically turning millions of Americans who, in previous generations, were not had no would have had no criminal background at all, and turning them into criminals. This war on drugs morphed over some 5 decades from being a tool against the counterculture, as the counterculture had become more mainstream, to becoming a tool that basically targeted minority communities, because minority communities began to be much more heavily policed. And with all these new statutes and rules on the books, now the police have all these weapons that they can use to tag on charges to people. And once an arrest or a trial, or especially a conviction, once a person has one under their belt for a drug possession or trafficking violation, then now it becomes virtually impossible for that person to find adequate employment, to become upwardly mobile. Sometimes they can't find employment at all, right? I mean, some job sites, they will not extend uh, employment opportunities to persons with drug convictions. They won't do it, right? Not only that, but even persons who want to perhaps operate their own business. These local governments and state governments, many of them have regulatory and licensing requirements. And if in order to operate this business legally, you have to be licensed or approved. And if you have a conviction for drug possession or trafficking, that almost rules you out automatically, meaning you cannot legally even start your own business, depending upon what you're doing. You could not even start your own business if you have one of these convictions on your records. This is crazy, completely outrageous means of law enforcement and criminal justice. Now, I can already hear some people say, wait, Brother John, if you want to defeat the war on drugs, then the best thing you could do is to just obey the law. Don't fool with the stuff in the first place, and you defeat the war on drugs. Yes, I hear that. And yes, there is credibility to that. However, for people who think like this, I challenge them to examine the 1920s. Because, see, in the 1920s, the government had passed, Congress had passed the Prohibition Law, right? So the Prohibition Amendment to the Constitution basically made it illegal to possess or consume alcohol in the borders of the United States of America. Now, the amendment then forced state and local governments to pass subsidiary laws, that their own laws, to make it even that much more difficult to consume alcohol or possess it. So now, if you are a hardworking man who would just like to have a mug of beer after work, or if you are a mother or wife and you like to have a glass of wine with dinner, you, Mr. or Mrs. America, are now a criminal according to the government. You're a criminal. Now, prohibition had the effect of turning millions of regular, everyday, working class Americans, mostly white, into criminals. That caused an outrage and an uproar that basically forced Congress to repeal this monstrosity within 12 years, right? The first, and to this point, only amendment to the American Constitution that has ever been repealed in its entirety because of the effect it was having on the society. Now, let's fast forward 40 years or so into the early 1970s. The Nixon administration comes in. They propose this war on drugs. They have willing accomplices in the Congress and in state houses and local governments around the country. Everybody jumps on board, and all of a sudden, all these new statutes and laws go up, turning what basically amounts to small possession charges or usage of marijuana or cocaine or opioids or something like that, and turn it into criminal charges and convictions. And because they're focusing on minority communities now, it's usually Black and Hispanics that are stuck with this albatross around their necks, making it very difficult to find proper employment. Now, on a personal level, let me relate this story to you. Several years ago, I had the occasion to be at the Harris County Jail. Now, obviously, I live here in Houston, Harris County, very diverse place in the United States of America. Heavily Black, Hispanic, and Asian in the city of Houston itself, but a much larger white population in suburban and the few rural areas of Harris County, right? Now, while I was down there at the Harris County Jail, I noticed that an overwhelming population of the Harris County Jail were men of Black and Hispanic descent. Now, because I understood the demographic nature of this town, I was just left dumbfounded by where are the white people? Where are they? Right? I mean, here you have this massive jail system, and yes, there were some whites there. Now, I'm not saying they were completely absent, but completely disproportionate to their part in the population. Although every bit of research and evidence I have ever seen has made it clear that drug use and abuse and trafficking is as high in white communities as there are in minority communities. And yet, in the Harris County Jail, the overwhelming population of the Harris County Jail were persons of Black and Hispanic descent, right? This, friends, has to end. This war on drugs has to be brought to an end. How can it be done? Well, obviously, there's a need for leadership. And in fact, some courageous leader or group, preferably on a national level, but even on a state level, would have to just come up and say, it is our mission to end the war on drugs, right? Decriminalize possession of small amounts that are suitable for personal consumption only. Expunge many of these convictions from the official ledger so that these people can have the right to go and have the ability to secure the kind of employment that they need for themselves and to support their families, right? And it also spares them of all of the legal costs of having to hire a lawyer or pay court fees or take time off from work to handle this nonsense charges that are frequently brought against them, right? But there will have to be a movement by a leader who's unapologetic in their approach. And this has to be done. And I can almost guarantee you, in fact, I can guarantee you, that once these state and municipal governments, along with the federal government, begin decriminalizing all of this stuff and expunging these people's records, from the criminal records, you will actually begin to see the wealth and income gap in the country begin to narrow, right? And that's the whole goal. Now, the good news is there are already states that have begun to do this, right? And that's good. But these are baby steps. We really need a very large, completely comprehensive program that will end once and for all the war on drugs. And that would be the single best thing that would narrow the wealth and income gap between whites and non-whites. All right. So those are my thoughts for this week. If you found this video insightful, instructive, hey, hit that thumbs up button. I would really appreciate it. Also, please leave a comment. I want to know what you think about the racial wealth gap and the war on drugs. And you can either combine those together or take them one at a time, either way. And of course, please subscribe. Subscribe to Invest Strong. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, friends, and good blessings.